So I'll start kind of blabbing here, or stop. Ebony said, loved your fall container video. I'll be going to my local garden shop today. Great, Ebony. Of course, if you're not in our neck of the woods, if you're not in the Hampton Roads area and you can't come see us, definitely check out your local garden centers. They're amazing places. That's where you're going to find the most expert advice about your local area, and that's where you're probably going to get the biggest plant selection and the right plant selection and be the most successful. And with all of our videos, all of our webinars here that we're doing them live, obviously, but they're taped. They're going to be on our Facebook page. They'll also be on our website. If you go to mcdonaldgardencenter.com and you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see our webinar link. You just click on that webinar link and you can see all the past videos, and we'll get notes up there as soon as we can get the notes produced. I have my notes, but then we've got somebody else that goes through and really makes them look a little bit more attractive than what my notes will look like. I do have to give a quick shout out as we get started to our houseplant buyer. We're talking about houseplants this week because houseplants are just so popular right now, and they're just such an amazing selection out there. And I got to give a shout out to Sarah, our houseplant buyer. She is doing an amazing job. She is just a wealth of knowledge. She's been with McDonald Garden Center for a long time. She knows so much. She's taught me so much, and she sent me just loads of notes for this seminar because I want to get a little bit more detailed. So we did one on Wednesday that talks about kind of basic houseplant care. So that was kind of a general, broad. I did my top 5 easiest indoor plants to grow. So go check out that one if you didn't see it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a little bit more specific. I'm going to talk about some specific plants that are super, super popular right now, and that maybe you've tried to grow, or maybe you haven't been successful with, or maybe you've been afraid to grow them in your homes because you might be a little bit tentative about it. So I'm going to give you the information to be successful with these very, very popular plants right now. And a lot of these are what we have in stock right now. We'll talk about some that maybe are harder to find. I will tell you, because of houseplants and how popular they are, there's a slight shortage throughout the year, and it kind of goes up and down. So it's kind of a hill and valley type of scenario where sometimes we'll be able to get everything that we want. Sometimes we can't get everything we want. And so that's what I always tell people is I think, we have probably the best selection of houseplants here in Hampton Roads for sure. We have a huge collection, and it is just constant. I mean, almost every week we're getting in new shipments of all the different types of plants for your indoor spaces, and they're just so popular, and we're just loading them in. So keep checking us out. Come on in and check us out. You can talk to us. We can explain different things to you. And if you were looking for a specific plant that might be a little bit rarer and harder to find, then we might be able to tell you when we think we might be able to get it, or we might be able to put you in a different direction that might suit your needs. So definitely check out your local garden centers, and definitely check out our houseplant collection here. It changes weekly. It's amazing. And again, just shout outs to our team here. We've got amazing houseplant people here, as well as our Great Neck location has a huge collection of indoor plants. And Sarah, our buyer, is just amazing. I mean, she is just doing a crazy, crazy good job this year. And every year that she's worked here, she's just a great person. So thank you, Sarah. I'll give you a shout out. I don't know if you're watching, but if you are watching, if you ask any questions, she might be able to answer those. And if you ask me questions that I don't know, I'll be honest, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll get back to you as soon as we get done with this webinar. So feel free to ask questions throughout this webinar. I'm going to say hello to Marianne and hello to Gloria from PA. Great. And Marianne's from Central Ohio. Great. So we've got people watching all over the country. Great to hear. All right, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to start with, like I said, I'm going to do this a little bit more specifically. So I'm going to talk about some major groups of plants that are very, very popular right now. And the first one I'm going to start with is bromeliads. Bromeliads are a gorgeous plant. I think a lot of us get stuck in the foliage world, and we're always looking for this bold foliage, which is awesome, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But bromeliads offer color, and so bromeliads are just an amazing plant. Here's a gorgeous one. This is a collection of 3 different colors here. So we've got an orange, we've got kind of this pinkish red, and this maroon kind of purple color. So you can see those colors right there. I know these two are kind of showing up about the same, but this is really a bright orange, and this is really a red. And just an amazing, amazing plant. Very, very easy to grow, actually. So there's a couple different varieties. There's these that show this color, this taller spike typically, that show this really pretty bloom color as these new leaves emerge. And so these are really pretty plants, and these blooms last a long time. They last about 3 months. So it's a great plant for color, and so they just last a long time, and they're very easy to grow. There's also this other variety here that's a little bit shorter, and doesn't tend to bloom as heavily. It will bloom. You can kind of, if you look down in there, you can see the blooms coming out, or it's starting to form. But really, these are just gorgeous because this foliage color is amazing. And so this is kind of more grown for its foliage, whereas these bromeliads are grown more for their bloom color. And these blooms, like I said, last for a long time, and this color is just spectacular. Just amazing. This one's called the tricolor bromeliad. And they call these Neos, and I'm going to probably butcher this name, but this is Guzmania. So this is a different type of bromeliad, but these are very, very similar. So these can actually take low to medium light, so they don't need bright direct light like you might think. I think a lot of us think of these as almost in the, maybe not the succulent family, but they look like that they need a lot of light. But actually a lot of light will burn kind of the leaves and kind of scar the leaves up a little bit. So you definitely want to grow these in a little bit of a medium to low light, which is awesome that you can get this kind of color in a medium to low light room. They like a wet dry cycle. You don't want to let them get too dry. So you want to let them get, pretty dry, but you don't want to get them let them get succulent dry. And you'll know what I mean by that as we get to succulents. I'm going to talk about succulents too. But you want to let them get kind of dry, and a great tester is your finger right here. Just kind of touch the soil, and I'm feeling the soil right here, and you can kind of see it. It's pretty dry. So this one, I put my finger in down about an inch, and I feel a little bit of moisture, so it can probably make it another day or two, and then we can water it really, really well. So bromeliads are awesome. Let's see, I think I've got a couple other examples here. They come in a wide range of colors. I mean, this one's kind of this really cool kind of fuchsia pink color. So you can get them single like this, and they're not real expensive, and they're just super, super cool looking plants. So I love these guys. A little bit of care if you start to get more of them growing. So we'll go back to this one as an example. This one, as it starts to mature, and this is 3 separate plants that were planted together to get those 3 different colors. But let's say this was just this plant. In about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, you're going to start to see all these pups growing off of it. So the mother plant has the bloom stalk. Let's go back to this one right here. So the mother plant here, this bloom stalk will eventually go, and you can just cut it out on the inside, and it'll eventually form another one. But also it forms these little babies or pups that are on the inside here, and you can usually pick them out, and you'll usually see them, and you can regrow those, or you can just let them form. And so I grabbed one here. This is a different type of bromeliad. This is called Fireball, but you can see what can happen over the years of growing them. So I love this look. I think this is cool. It's just by cutting out those bloom stalks, then you get this bushier, fuller plant. You can see I've got a plant over here. Let's see if you can see that. See that little guy that's formed off of there? You got another one that's formed off of here. So I could go through and separate some of these, but I enjoy them like this. I think they're really cool, and they get bushier and fuller. So this is a really, really great way of growing them as well, is just letting them get bushy. And so all of these bloom spikes have been spent, and we've clipped them out, and you just keep getting more and more growth. So bromeliads are awesome about that being able to grow different ways. Let's see, did I miss any other notes from her? I don't think so. I think that pretty much covers bromeliads. I'm going to try and roll through these as quickly as I can, so you get some of that kind of that basic advice that we can give you for all of these very, very popular plants. So like I said, low to medium light, blooms for 3 months, just awesome, awesome color. And there's a couple different varieties with the taller spikes, but also the shorter growth, more grown for its foliage for that variegation, which is just amazing. And these are great plants, just awesome, awesome plants. Medium to low light, wet dry cycle, super, super easy, but a very, very popular plant. So Gloria said, do you water inside the bloom? So bromeliads grow in the rainforest, in the trees, and so they collect water down into these kind of like little valleys in their leaves. And I believe, Gloria, what you're asking is, should you fill them up with water? You can. It's not a bad idea. Definitely, I always talk about watering, so I talked about it at length in my last video. Definitely don't use tap water, or if you use tap water, let it sit for about 24 to 48 hours before you use it on these plants. And you can put water in that cup down there, so you can see that cup real easily on this one. But don't let it sit in there too long. So it does like to collect some moisture in there. It does it so that if it's very, very warm in the rainforest, in the tropical climate, that it has a little reservoir of water to use. But don't let it sit in there in our house or in our home for too long. You can let it do for probably about maybe 4 to 6 hours and then dump it out, just so it gives you that kind of humidity kind of type of feeling. Misters are great for these. You can mist the leaves. It gives it that humidity as well. So really, really great plant. You do not have to fill up the cup though. You don't have to worry about that at all if you don't want to. If you do get some water in there, just make sure to dump it out after a little while. You just don't want it to sit in there too long. Rainwater would be a different story. You can leave it there for a little while. So that's a really, really good one. Great question, Gloria. Linda said, I assume you take the dead flower off as you do with other plants. Yep, so as this bloom goes, you just go in and clip this out of the center, and you just leave those leaves, and you got these really pretty leaves, these gorgeous leaves that you can grow on for years. So really, really easy to do. Great plant. Bromeliads are super, super popular right now. All right, so I'm going to move on to, let's see, what do we got next here? We've got succulents. So we'll talk about succulents. That kind of works pretty well to go right into the succulent class. Succulents are super, super popular. Very, very kind of modern looking, lots and lots of different styles and colors. So the most important thing with succulents is bright light. They love bright light for sure. So you want to typically get them in a west or south facing window. So you got a lot of light coming in through the window. That really, really helps keep them nice and full. If you tend to see that they're kind of stretching or bending for the light, this goes well for cactus as well. So here's a cactus that I pulled and grabbed. This is a really cool one. This one's called a variegated spineless. And so if you see this cactus starting to kind of bend over this way, that means it's not getting enough light. You need to kind of put it in a brighter spot to allow it to grow straight and vertical. Also with any kind of cactus or succulents, or really any indoor plants, turn them every so often. Just give them a little quarter turn. I usually do it every time I water my indoor plants. I just give it a little quarter turn. That way they grow a little bit more evenly. So if they are kind of bending towards a little bit of light, you can turn them and they'll kind of stay a little bit more vertical that way. But most succulents are going to prefer that really, really nice bright light. So a west and south facing window is going to give you the most amount of light that they need. Some of the gray varieties, so we'll talk about succulents here. So when we say some of the gray varieties like this guy right here, this is a Echeveria, but also a type of kind of like succulent or hens and chick kind of style succulent. These are all in the succulent group. These are more of that kind of grayish color, and so these can actually take a little bit less light, but still in that medium to high light range. But if it gets too much bright light, you might see some scorching on the leaves. But this one does very, very well in a very bright room, but maybe not in that direct sunlight. So that's what when we say gray. Then also like the reds and the purples, which you can see kind of the red tinge on those leaves there. I'm going to try and get this close so you can kind of see a little bit of that red tinge. So this is a jade, which again is in the second plant. Jades are one of the easiest indoor plants to grow. Really, really pretty. And I brought this one just because if you've ever grown a jade plant, you might see that it's getting very thin. The leaves are getting farther and farther apart. And that's a sure sign that it needs a little bit more sunlight. So it needs a brighter lit room. But jades are really, really easy to grow. Succulents are awesome in general. The way to water succulents, I think, is the most important thing. Is when you get a succulent is to do it on a wet-dry cycle, but let it get really, really dry. And succulents store water in their leaves. So what will happen is when you water the plant, it'll absorb that moisture, it'll store it in its leaves and use it. So what you want to do is let it get really, really dry. And I brought that cactus because I think this is a great, hopefully we can see this on the camera. You almost want to let the soil get to the point where it's almost pulling away from the edge of the container. So I don't know if you can quite see that, but you can start to see where the soil is actually forming kind of a little bit of a cake ball, or basically pulling away from the side of the container. You usually can feel the container is a little bit looser around it, and that means that we're ready to go ahead and water this. Then you're going to water it really, really well. It's going to absorb that moisture again, and then let it drain. With any indoor plant, again, if you got a lot of specific kind of questions about broad-based care for indoor plants, check out my other webinar. That was a really basic one. Don't let this sit in water. You don't want it sitting in wet feet. So if you got saucers underneath your plants, don't let them sit in that moisture for too long. But get it really, really wet, let it dry out in between waterings, and that bright kind of direct light would be really helpful. And if you're in a really, really bright room, you should be fine as well. Succulents do great in a combination of different ones. I also brought this one, which I don't know that I've ever been able to say this name, but Horithia. So these are really, really awesome plants. This is a little miniature one. The reason I love these is because they're very easy to grow. I mean, I have one on my windowsill that I've probably had for about 2 or 3 years now, and I tend to neglect it. I tend to forget about it, and then I say, oh yeah, and then I just give it a good soaking, and it just lasts and lasts and lasts. And they don't tend to stretch as much. I think a lot of people get kind of concerned with succulents because they tend to kind of get a little sparse looking over time as they grow, because something like this plant is going to continue to grow vertical too, so it's going to continue to get almost kind of a tree-like, or it's going to bend over and kind of come a little different looking. And so a lot of people don't tend to like that, and so they either tend to throw it away or get a new one. What you can do is you can pull some of the leaves off. They're easy to propagate, so you can continue to grow them. Sarah makes a great suggestion, which is take all your cuttings from your succulents, put them in some soil, and see what grows throughout the year. So just take them outside and use them, or put them on, get a low bowl, a clay bowl and put some potting soil in there, and just take your cuttings and put them in that bowl, and then that way they can kind of continue to kind of grow and root out, and then you'll see what you have at the end of the summer and see what you can take inside and maybe separate or propagate and grow on. But what you can do is you can prune these guys. So a great example is this jade plant. You can prune this and it'll continue to grow from the inside, and then you can take that pruning and again just stick it in some soil. Very, very easy to do. So succulents are great because you can propagate them as well. Now aloe is a very popular succulent. So aloe is a little bit different as far as the watering schedule goes. These can go very, very dry, but what you really want to do is check the tips of your aloe plant. So on the tips here of your aloe, you'll feel them, and these feel pretty nice and full. So this will not need to be watered yet. But what will typically happen is this will start to thin. You might even see a little bit of yellowing, and then that's when you want to water your aloe. And it could be that the soil might even still feel a little bit moist. You might not get that pull away yet, but it still might be time to water because the plant is telling you so, because you can almost, I don't know if you can quite see it, but you can almost tell that this one's getting a little bit thin at the top, but the rest seem really nice and full. So that's how you can kind of check your aloe. And aloe is great. It's got, the healing properties. You can use it if you get a sunburn or any kind of burn that you might have. And aloe is just a great looking plant, and I love just the modern look of it. This sitting in a white pot just looks awesome, just growing in your home. And these kind of can take that medium to highlight as well. Aloe is a great addition to this succulent group of plants. So that's a really, really good one. A lot of people also ask about string of pearls. And so I've got one hanging behind me, and this would be one that we're a little low on. In fact, I don't even know, I didn't see any in there, so we might not have any right now. But string of pearls is a very commonly asked, how do I water it? Tends to be that most people overwater the string of pearls. So typically what I'll recommend is letting them get to almost what a dried up pea would look like. So you can kind of see that string right there. This is one that's actually I took out of our houseplant buyer's office. She's been growing this in her office for a while, and you can just see how cool that looks. But as these little peas start to kind of look a little shriveled up, then we know that they're ready to be watered. I mean, if I check the soil, it's dry, but the plant looks fine. So we're going to let this go till those peas start to shrink a little bit, and then we'll give it a nice good soaking, and it'll revive itself and look great. And then that's kind of how you can do that wet-dry cycle. A lot of times the plants will tell you when they need to be watered. As far as fertilization goes, a liquid cactus food is perfectly fine. So a succulent or liquid cactus food, usually about 2 or 3 times a year. Spread them out about every 3 months. In the winter, obviously, most of your succulents aren't going to grow very quickly. We don't stay quite as warm, and a lot of times, even in our homes, we're going to pick up some drafts and they're going to stay cooler. You're probably going to water a little bit less. And so when plants are not actively growing, typically in the winter time frame, they don't need to be fed because you're kind of forcing it to grow when they don't want to. So let them kind of go into their kind of stagnant, dormant state in the winter, and then coming into the spring is when you would want to fertilize in the spring, summer, and fall. You can kind of get in those feeds. With a liquid feed, you can probably feed a little bit more often if you want to, because it's going to work its way through the soil a little bit faster than a granular fertilizer. So let's see, did I miss anything else? I think that pretty much covers succulents. So just don't be afraid to cut them and regrow them. And when you cut one, it should fill back out. And it's very, very easy to do. Yeah, it's going to go through a little bit of a period where it's not going to look amazing after you prune the top out of it, but you will get growth from underneath. And you can take that cutting and then go plant it again and reroot that plant and start to grow again. Succulents can even grow from their leaves. So you can just take a leaf off of this echeveria. We can just take that leaf off and we can just lay that on some soil, stick the end in the soil a little bit, and then just don't overwater it too much, and we should get a new plant eventually. So that does take time, and you don't have to do it. And succulents have become pretty readily available, so you don't always have to do that. If you just want them to look good all the time and you want to keep replacing them, I love doing that. Can kind of treat it as an annual if you want to, and just kind of replant new ones as you want them, and that way you can kind of keep on constantly changing it. So there's great succulents are super, super popular, and we have a huge collection right now. I mean, absolutely amazing all the different types of varieties there are, and every kind of succulent might like something different. They're going to require different watering. So if you do a combination, try and get some that are very similar. But also, you might water with, I love using a turkey baster. It's my little tip, my little trick. Take a turkey baster, water that specific area when that area is dry, and then you might have to water all three of them differently. It just depends. Every succulent's going to be different. Every succulent's going to absorb water differently and grow differently. So that's what's so cool about them, is there's such a huge assortment. But as far as the light goes, I think that's probably the most important thing, is make sure to get them a good bright light, because that's what they're used to. So now we can move on to, I think I've covered pretty much everything there on succulents. We're going to move on to philodendrons. So these are really, really popular plants. So philodendrons have become super, super popular. One of my favorites here is the moonlight. So this is a moonlight philodendron, really, really pretty color. Philodendrons are super, super popular right now because there's so many different types and styles, and the bold foliage on it. You can see this foliage here. I'll bring it out and bring some of these a little bit closer so we can see them all. So maybe what I'll do first is just say, in general, they like medium to bright light. And so I think a lot of us grow philodendrons. Probably the most popular variety of philodendron was kind of that heart-shaped philodendron. So I've got one here. Let me start with that one. This one's a big one. I couldn't find any small ones. I don't know if we have any small ones right now, but this is a gorgeous one. Philodendrons are all vines. So as you can see, we've got this one kind of stapled onto this piece of wood here. It's nice and strong. And philodendrons, so this one is a heart-shaped philodendrons. Now these can actually take medium to low light. The heart-shaped philodendrons, the original kind of, they kind of look similar to a pothos. So let's see, I don't think I have another pothos around here, but you can maybe see this one if I pull it over here. Let's see. Let's see if I can get this out so you can see it. So this is a pothos. So pothos and philodendrons were pretty much kind of confused for a long time there, but they're very, very similar, as you can tell. This one's obviously got variegation, but some pothos are just green or even that kind of neon color. But pothos are very, very easy. You can take medium to low light, and some of the philodendron, the heart-shaped philodendrons, can as well. What you want to be careful there is don't overwater them, because typically in a medium to low light situation, you're not going to get as much evaporation. It's not going to dry out as long. It's not going to use as much of that moisture. So just make sure to let it get a little bit drier than you typically would in a philodendron in a medium to high light situation. That heart-shaped philodendron can grow in a lot of different areas. Very, very easy one to grow. But they're not as popular now as some of these other ones. Like this moonlight is just gorgeous. All the new leaves come out in this kind of chartreuse lime green color. Just awesome, awesome plant. So that one's a really pretty one. And then, of course, the monsteras. Let's see, do I have one? I think I got a little one. The split leaf philodendron. So this is actually a tetrasperma. I grabbed the wrong one, but it's very similar. So a split leaf philodendron, which is also similar to the Swiss cheese philodendron. Here you can see. So that monstera, the split leaf philodendrons, these are going to be the really, really popular ones, the more hard to find ones. And the ones that I think a lot of people, say, oh, that should be a fairly easy one. Make sure they get medium to high light. So that's probably the most important thing that I can tell you, is also that they're a vine. So if you're letting them kind of grow out and trail, they're going to trail. If you want to grow them on a structure or some sort of piece of wood or a totem pole of some sort, then you can put that in there and just let it vine onto that. You might have to attach it, pin it to it, maybe use a little bit of fishing line to attach it to it as well. But philodendrons are super, super popular right now. That foliage is just amazing, just an awesome, awesome plant. When you want to water it well, and then let it dry out slightly. And so, and that really goes for those medium to highlight situations, is we really want to let them dry out slightly, but not get bone dry. So it's a wet dry cycle, it's just slightly different. We're gonna do wet dry, but we're gonna call it slightly dry. So we're gonna let this dry out a little bit, but not to the point where it's caking up like a succulent, and maybe not even as dry as maybe a bromeliad. But really, really kind of easy plant to grow as long as you get the right light. I think that's the most important thing. I know that I bought a Philodendron monstera, put it in a pretty shady spot, as well as I think a lot of us do. Didn't get quite as much sun, and it started to stretch, and it was kind of a slow death. Now, I took mine outside, which I think is a great idea, especially if you have plants that are struggling a little bit. Take them outside, put them in a little shady location, and let them rehab outside in the summer, bring them back in the fall, and then try a new location. Once you find a good location for it, I say keep them there. Grow them there year after year after year, and just keep them in that same situation. If they're happy, then keep them there. They're super, super awesome plants once you can get them to grow very well. But Philodendron, this is a Swiss cheese. Let's see if I can get another one over here. So this is a cool one. This one's called... So this one is new. This one's kind of a rare. This one's called Giganteum. So this one, I'm going to read this because I didn't know about this one until she sent me this note. So Giganteum is a rare variety that we have in stock now. The leaves can become 4 to 5 feet tall and 3 feet wide. So that's an amazingly big, bold foliage plant. So this is a really, really kind of a cool new variety, or I should say rare variety, that is awesome. I mean, that's a big plant. So really, really cool. Philodendrons are just awesome because they have that amazing foliage. So they're a vine. I think that's probably the most important thing, is that they're a vining plant. So I'll show you this one. This one's also a tetrasperma, but I grabbed it anyways just because it looks so similar to that split leaf philodendron. But you can see that vining habit, and you can see the little roots coming out of it. And so they're naturally vines, and that's fine if you want to let these kind of trail down. They look awesome on bookshelves as they kind of trail down through the bookshelf, but also you can also kind of get these up and staked on something. I think probably the most common thing is as your philodendron gets a little bit bigger and older, it can get a little wild looking. So having something to keep its verticality is very, very good. You can use a piece of wood, you can use a wood stake, you can use a moss covered stake. There's a lot of different options. Even a trellis would work as well. So there's lots and lots of options for your philodendrons. We carry them in a lot of different sizes. This is a little one that I found. This one's called Philodendron Mia. So again, just so cool. I love that waxy green leaf. Really, really nice looking plant. And there's lots and lots of different varieties out there now, and they're very, very popular. So you got a lot of choices with philodendrons, and they're pretty easy. I think probably, like I said, the most common mistake with philodendrons is a lot of people think they don't need a lot of light. Medium to low light is what I think a lot of people know, because that's what the old-fashioned philodendrons used to be, that heart-shaped philodendron that you can see right here in my hand. So in fact, let me just kind of snap a little leaf off of here, so you can kind of see what I mean by that heart shape. So there's your heart-shaped, your typical heart-shaped philodendron. And so these can take medium to low light, as I mentioned, but they don't have to be. You can grow these in a little bit more light if you want to. But this is what we used to sell as kind of that fail-safe plant along with pothos. But as we get into these newer, or I shouldn't say newer, but more sought-after varieties these days, those really like medium to bright light. So those big leaves are trying to capture that light, so make sure you give it to it. If you see a plant leaning, again, it's a great indicator that maybe it's not enough light, or maybe if it's doing well, it's healthy and it's not stretching. So stretching is typically where it puts on a lot of work and then sets off a leaf, and then puts on a little bit more work and sets off a leaf. And so you got a lot of space in between leaves, and that's when stretching means you need a little bit more light. So definitely do that. That will definitely help keep it a little bit more compact, and also stop it from kind of leaning towards the light a little bit. So just kind of keep moving your plants around until you find a great location for it. But philodendrons are super, super popular right now, and they're not as hard to grow as a lot of us maybe thought they were at first. The next one I'm going to talk about is fiddle-leaf figs, which kind of gets the name of the finicky fig. So this is what I've got right here. I'm not going to take it out because it's a big plant. But fiddle-leaf figs you probably saw at the beginning of the year in a lot of those home decorating magazines, and there's a lot of them in pictures and stuff like that. Amazing foliage, gorgeous looking plant. They do like specific things, which is humidity, I think, is the most important thing, and bright light. So most of your figs, your ficus, your figs that you grow inside don't need, medium light is typically recommended, but this one really likes bright light. So you want to get it in an area that's got a little bit more brighter light, and it likes humidity, which is harder to do when you've got a big plant like this. I mean, fiddle leaf figs are usually bigger plants. You can get some smaller ones too, but the bigger they are, the harder it is to get the humidity all over them. And so if you see browning specks on the leaves, if you get a lot of leaf loss, it's usually due to the humidity. So without the humidity, they can become sparse, and you might think that you're going to lose her. What I would do is take it outside, give it that summer vacation, put it in a shady spot. But outdoors here in the Hampton Roads, for sure, you're going to get a lot more humidity. There's a lot more moisture in the air, and so it's going to do a lot better in those kind of conditions. And then you can bring it back in and try it in a different location and hopefully get it reacclimated and get it to a situation where it's going to grow very well. A tray underneath it, a saucer with rock in it, and create it as a humidity tray, make a humidity tray out of it. That will allow the moisture to kind of stay in the area. But again, bigger plants, harder to get a lot of that humidity in the area. So fiddle leaf figs are a little finicky. Let's see, did I miss anything else that she said? Big leaves. So, and this kind of goes for any big leaf like that big philodendron. But this big fiddle leaf fig collects a lot of dust, which is a great point. So we typically are going to recommend this with every fiddle leaf fig that we try and that we sell, is to get some leaf shine to help keep some of that dust off. And leaf shine is a great option for that. Also, you can use, of course, just a damp rag with, just a clean rag with some water on it, just to wash off those leaves. But those leaves are kind of, I wouldn't say brittle, but kind of more of what you would think of as a leaf. And if you push too hard, you can hurt it. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to break the leaf. We don't want to break the tissue. And so the leaf shine is a great option to be able to clean up these leaves, get the dust off, and keep the dust off for a little while. And it makes it nice and shiny too. It makes it look good. And what that will do is keep the pores clear and be able to allow the plant to breathe. Dust on the leaves doesn't allow the plant to breathe as it would like to. So that's a very good point with the fiddle leaf figs. I brought this one in just as an example. Fiddle leaf figs you can grow as a tree. You can prune these as well. So it's a great thing to know that, if you bring one back in from inside, or if you're taking it outside to kind of rehab it a little bit, it's a great time to go and prune it in the spring. Allow that kind of new flush of growth, keeps it a little bit more compact. But depends on how you're growing it or what you want it to be. You could take the lower leaves off and allow the top to grow. You can cut it back and create a bushier plant. So there's a lot of different options with this, but the most important thing is bright light and keep the humidity up. So if you've got a sunroom or something like that, keep it away from a vent so that it's not low humidity in the winter, and try the tray underneath it with the rock and the water in it. I think that really, really helps keep the humidity level up a little bit. Okay, on to the next one, which is calatheas. Another really, really popular plant. These are awesome. There's a lot of different varieties of these. The striking foliage is obviously the main thing about this plant that people love. Calatheas are awesome, awesome plants. Let's see, I think I had another one in here. Oh, here we go. So this one's got a little bit of that pink in there, and this one's got a little bit of that kind of chartreuse lime green color. So really, really pretty plants. Calatheas, a lot of people want to know how to grow these. They do like medium light and high humidity again. So humidity is very, very important with your indoor plants, and they like a lot of humidity. So because these are smaller plants, you should be fine with getting away with putting the saucer underneath with the rock so that you can get that humidity level up, because they're much smaller plants. But they're just awesome. I love the underside of the leaves, especially when you get some light shining through on the other side. So in that morning, you can really see the variegation on the underside and on the top. So just really, really cool, unusual foliage. Look great in containers, and just are a very, very popular plant right now that a lot of people are seeking out, all these different types of calatheas. And so we've got a couple different varieties in now, and we'll continue to try and get in more as we go. So the one thing is misting. I know I mentioned misting a lot with to keep humidity up. So when we're talking about different plants, misting the leaves helps. Like I didn't mention that with the philodendrons, but philodendrons do well with a little bit of mist because they've got those air roots that kind of come out and try and get some of that humidity as well out of the air. Calatheas have a little bit of a fuzzier side on the underside, and so if we mist these leaves, they tend to get powdery mildew. So again, the saucer is the best thing to increase the humidity on your calatheas. So really hope that helps. Calatheas are awesome, easy plants to grow. A lot of people will take them out in the summer months, put them on a shady porch. All of your indoor plants typically are going to do best out in the shade outside. So if you're ever taking them out to a summer vacation, don't put them in full direct light. Most of them aren't going to like it. Even your succulents might not love that as much. They would love a little bit of that afternoon sun, but they don't want all day sun because they're not used to it. Inside, they're not going to get as much sunlight. So if you're taking your plants out for a summer vacation, definitely grow them on a porch, underneath some trees, that type of condition, so they're getting some dapple light. A majority of these plants grow in that situation anyway. In the tropical rainforest, they're understory plants. A lot of them are going to grow as smaller plants. Something like a fiddle leaf fig might get huge, and all the figs get pretty big in the tropical rainforest, which is why we say bright light inside. But something like a calathea, you would want to take outside and put on a front porch or in a shady location if you're taking it out for summer vacation. If your leaves begin to curl on these a little bit, then you're probably watering them too much. They like a wet dry cycle again, but don't let them get, so we say slightly dry in this situation. So we want to let them get a little bit dry, but we don't want to let them dry out. So it's a wet dry cycle, but probably somewhere around that 2 to 3 week time frame is where you're going to water. Super great plant, just awesome foliage. So calatheas are awesome. All right, so then we're going to do a kind of a different one here, Dischidia. Dischidias are really cool looking plants. So these are vines, and they're pretty rare, so they're harder to come by. So these are awesome plants. We just got a nice little group in here. So just a really light vine, very cool plant. Again, you can grow these in a hanging basket, up on a bookcase or something, and let those vines trail down. You can also attach them to things. They will root in. So we got these awesome little plaques here. These are cool. So this is a Dischidia plaque. This is a variegated one, so you can see that. See if I can get that a little bit closer. So these are really cool. This is basically a little bit of moss that's been wired to this piece of wood, and then you can hang this on a wall. And you would mist this guy, and they do like to be misted because they have these vines and these air roots that are out trying to find water in the air. But you would just mist this and let this kind of keep growing, and this is going to root right into this moss back here. The cool thing about this as well is if it's getting too dry, you can take this and lay it down and just water that moss really good, let it get nice and moist, then let it drip dry, and then go hang it back up on your wall. So that's a really cool, different one, Dischidia. And these kind of like, let me see if the medium light, so they like medium light and then water when lightly dry. So as these begin to just barely dry out, you want to water them a little bit more. Again, humidity is going to be a really good one. And the misting on these, and this is what Sarah said, is she's been experimenting with misters on her indoor plants at home, and she said this plant just has gone nuts because of the misting on it. So just take your mister, a little mister here, and just mist away on it every 2 or 3 days maybe, just to kind of keep that moisture and that humidity up, and it's going to thrive. And so this is a rare plant that you don't see a lot of, and we got some in stock right now. These plaques are really cool, and we've got the hanging basket, which is really neat too. And so again, you can take this you pop this off, plant this in a small pot and put it on your bookcase or on a shelf or on a table, and this little light vine is just going to trail. So if you're a plant collector out there, this might be one for you. And they're pretty easy to grow. Medium light, keep the humidity up, use a mister, water on a slightly wet dry cycle, let them slightly dry out, and you're going to be good to go. So pretty simple and really cool plant. All right, so let's go on to ponytail palms. This is a really cool plant. Ponytail palms are one of the easier palms to grow, really, and we have a great selection of them right now. So let me grab this guy. I just love it because this grassy look. I mean, these look great in pots, and I just love that it trails around itself. Really cool. And as these get older, they'll get these kind of feet on them, and I've got one here, so I'll show you that in a second. But they get kind of what we call like an elephant foot on them, so they're going to get this kind of cool looking little base to them. But they kind of look like this grass. They're very easy to grow right now. You can grow these in a low light situation, so medium to low light. And then water on a wet dry cycle. So you don't have to, you really want to make sure that it's digging down and trying to get water out of the base. So you don't want to keep them too moist, but you want to make sure that you're developing a good root system, because sometimes the ponytail palms can get a little top heavy and can fall out of their containers a little bit because the water source is staying high, and so it's not going deep down. So when you water it, you want to make sure to water it thoroughly and let it dry out, and so that it's reaching down and it's developing that good root system. So with this, probably the most important tip is to stay away from the tap water. If you can collect rainwater, that's the best solution. If you're seeing a lot of browning on the tips of your leaves, if you're getting a lot of browning in your palm fronds and your leaves, then it's probably the tap water. So make sure to let your tap water, let some of those chemicals evaporate, leave it out for about 24 to 48 hours. That's super, super important. And I really think that does help keep your ponytail palms nice looking. Let me show you that bigger one. So here's a bigger one here, and you can see that foot there. Look at that, isn't that cool? So this would look just amazing in a pot. You can take a lot of these leaves off, so you can go and you just pull them off. You can just kind of work your way around, so you can actually limb this guy up a little bit, what I would call that, where you can just kind of work a lot of these leaves off, and you can start to expose that really cool kind of trunk to it. And it's going to store water in this base here. So that's why they're so drought tolerant of a palm. Most palms are going to be kind of keep it a moist. Palms and ferns are those ones that indoors we're going to try and keep moist, somewhat consistently moist, not overly wet, not too dry, so they're a little kind of iffy about that. You want to just kind of keep them a little bit evenly moist. This one actually will store water in this base here, so it can take it a little bit more on that wet-dry cycle, which is what we're used to. And so that's why I really like this ponytail palm. Just a very unique look, kind of that grassy look, and just a cool looking palm. So we've got a great selection of those right now, and they're pretty easy to grow. Let's see, did I miss anything on her notes there as well? No, I think I got everything there. So really, really cool plant. Ponytail palms are a great one. Let's see. All right, so now we're going to talk about, last but not least, before I get to all of your questions, is orchids. There's a lot of people that I think are scared from growing orchids. They think they might be somewhat finicky. Orchids are actually pretty durable plants, and they're actually pretty easy to grow when you just kind of know that you got it in the right situation. So orchids, like a lot of orchids, the most common is your moth orchid. So your moth orchids that you typically are going to see, there's a lot of different varieties of them or a lot of different colors, but moth orchids are a great looking orchid. They bloom very, very profusely, and they bloom for a long period of time too. You can get up to 2 or 3 months out of these blooms sometimes. And then the most common, I think most people want to grow a moth orchid, and they're probably really one of the easier ones. They like morning light, so you want to pick an east facing window. You can get away with a west facing window if you're a little bit pulled away from it. But if on an east-facing window, it's going to do great in that morning light. You would probably not want it in a south or a north. South would be too much sun. North would be probably way too much shade. So the best way is by telling the green of the leaves. So you can see how healthy and green this looks. And that is how you know if you've got it in the right light situation. If you saw this turn into a lighter green, then it would be too much sun. If it's a really, really dark green, which you might think looks healthy, that's probably too much. That's probably too little light. And so you need to increase the light up on that orchid to improve that foliage there. But this perfectly even green, this nice middle ground, means you've got in the right light situation. The way that you want to water them is looking at their roots. So I grabbed this one because it's got a lot of these roots coming out of the pot, which is great. So you can kind of see that this green color means that it's well watered. If you start to see kind of white shriveled up roots, and I grabbed this one because it has one down here that you can kind of see. I don't know if you can quite see that. But this one's got a little bit of a white shriveled up piece here, and that's not the end of the world, and it's not a bad thing. This one just needs to be watered, not this root, but eventually as you start to see this kind of white kind of look come on them, then you want to water them. They do not like cold water or too hot water. They like room temperature water so that you're not changing the temperature of the water. Just my favorite advice is let your water sit for 24 to 48 hours in a watering can. Then you know that you've always got a great source of water. Every time I'm done watering, I fill it back up because I know I'm not going to use it for a day or two. And then you can pour this right over. Orchids, a lot of orchids grow in bark, and so you can grow them in moss, but bark is also a great option. And so let's see if I can take this out of this orchid pot here so you can see that root system in there. And the reason that they grow these in these containers is they can actually absorb some light through these containers. You don't have to grow it in a clear container. It's not necessary. But what it also helps the growers and also us know is how the roots are doing and if they need water. Now I've got these roots that are outside of the soil, which means I can see those, which is helpful. But they all have that green kind of color to them, which means, hey, I know this guy's pretty well watered. I don't need to water it today. I want to let those kind of start to go into that whiter color before I give it a good soaking. And that's what I like to do with bark, is I like to take it, put it in a bowl of water or something, or pour some water over it, let it sit in a saucer for a little bit of time to allow that bark to absorb moisture. Orchids grow in trees. So orchids attach themselves to trees and in the bark, and they run their roots into the bark. And so that's what they want, is a slow trickling water over that bark, or that bark to absorb the moisture, and then they can pull the moisture out of the bark over time. And so that's why you're going to plant them in a barky mix. When do you replant orchids? When these roots are pretty excessive. So right now we're getting closer to being able to replant this one. It's blooming, so I don't want to do it now. I want to allow it to bloom and do its thing. I don't want to cause any kind of stress to it. So once it's done blooming, I can go and replant this. And I'll just get a bag of, let's see if I brought some. Let me put this back in my orchid pot. So you just get this nice orchid bark right here, which this is just a special orchid mix. This is a potting mix that is basically bark, charcoal, and perlite. So it's a very loose mix. And this is just a basic orchid bark potting soil. So that's a really, really good one. And then if you've got other varieties, let's see if I grabbed another variety. I thought I grabbed a lady slipper. See if I can find it. So small, it's hidden. There it is. So here's a lady slipper. So really, really cool bloom. I grabbed this one because I think a lot of us think that lady slippers get one bloom per stalk, but they can actually get two, and you can kind of, if I can gently kind of pull those apart, you can see there's two of them. There's a bud coming. So there's another one, and this one actually has another one coming out of here. So this is a really pretty one. Now, most of your other orchids, other than moth orchids, so Phalaenopsis, lady slippers, there's thousands and thousands of different types of orchids out there. Most of your other orchids are gonna like a brighter light. So you're gonna wanna put those in a south or west facing window. But your moth orchids are pretty easy. They can take a little bit lower light. That morning light, afternoon shade is kind of perfect. And so all your other ones you can do in a little bit brighter light, and then your moth orchids in a little bit less light. These might grow in moss, so I grabbed this one because it's got a little bit of more of a mossy kind of potting soil. So let's see if I brought that, just so you can see what it looks like. Well, maybe I forgot that one. I thought I grabbed my moss. But it's basically just sphagnum moss. Oh, there it is. Kind of ran away on me. So this is just a premium orchid moss right here. And so you can see right in there, it's just that normal kind of long grain sphagnum moss, which is going to be really, really great for a lot of orchids. But orchid bark is a great one and kind of a traditional one that can be used on pretty much every orchid. Like I said, a lot of them grow in trees. A lot of people ask, how do I get my orchids to bloom again? So orchids are all about temperature typically. And so what we want to do is we want it to kind of go into a cooler time frame. So coming out of a warm time frame into a cooler time frame will help kind of produce those blooms a little bit quicker. So if you have an orchid that hasn't bloomed in a while, find a cool place for it. You might put it in one of your cooler rooms, one of the rooms that maybe you don't keep the heat on as much, or one that you don't turn the lights on as much, but you've got a nice window. Don't forget to water it. That's the most important thing. Do water it. Usually you're probably about every 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the growing conditions. Because it's a bark, it's going to be a little bit more watering. So for those people that are a little bit heavier handed on watering, orchids might be the right one for you. They don't need a lot of babying or pampering, but the orchid bark will dry out fairly quickly because it's a bark. It's not a lot of, there's not a lot of peat or compost in there like a normal potting soil is going to have. So it's not going to be able to hold a lot of moisture for a long period of time. That orchid bark's going to need to be soaked every once in a while. Temperature is the most important thing. What I used to like to do with my orchids is put them outside underneath a tree, and then coming out of that summer time frame, I'd bring them back in. It'd be cooler on the inside, and then they would start to produce their flower spikes pretty quickly. Also, as these blooms start to go, so I brought this moth orchid because it's just starting to put out blooms, but as this bloom finishes up here on the tip, you could see that the nodes keep on growing and you could get more and more blooms as this stem continues to grow out. But once you kind of see it stop growing from the tip and all of these blooms have gone, then you can go and start to cut back your stem and hopefully you can get new growth out. So this is what we call a node here. You can see that kind of little, what it looks like, a node is what we've called it. So maybe a little leaflet or a little indentation or different look on your stem here. And what you would do is just cut it right above that and see if you get another stalk growing out of it. Now, if it continues to die back, that means it's done. Then you would just cut it down here at the base and just wait for another group of blooms to come. My favorite orchid fertilizer is these two right here. We've got our Orchid Plus and our Orchid Better Blooms. Orchids love a high nitrogen water-soluble fertilizer. That's why you're going to see a 20-14-13 on this one. So that's a pretty high nitrogen content, but it's got watering directions on here and when to use it. And so this is what you would use on your regular basis. And then you get your Orchid Better Bloom, and this will help it bloom more profusely and for a longer period of time. As it starts to form that spike, you want to start using this, and that'll really, really help. So with orchids, it's really all about finding the right space, the right lighting. And then it's all about temperature if you want to help with the blooms, and giving a little bit of food every once in a while. That really, really helps the orchids. And there's just a huge, huge selection out there of different types of orchids. Watch your leaves. The leaves will tell you how they're doing and how the plant is performing, and if you need to change the light. Remember what I said, the lighter color means that it's getting too much sun. If it's a really, really dark green, like the color of this fiddle leaf fig here, then it's not getting enough light and it's in too shady of a condition and you need to bring it out. But moving your orchids around is not a problem. Typically make sure to replant them again when the root system is getting pretty massive for the pot and when it's not blooming. That really does help. So you can pour water over it. I know a lot of people used to use the ice cube trick, which was to put ice cubes, let them melt over it, because that kind of emulates that trickling water effect. We don't necessarily recommend that. That's very, very cold, and if you put it on a root, you could damage the root system. So I don't always recommend that, but if it works for you, great. That's awesome. I'm glad. There's a lot of these different ideas and thoughts out there, and if it works, then that's awesome. But moth orchids are gorgeous. And I think a lot of people are scared of them, or a lot of people, when they're done blooming, chuck them. Instead of chucking them, chuck them outside, especially if it's the spring or summer. Let them sit outside. You'd be amazed what you'll find when you bring it back inside. It'll shoot out these flower spikes and keep on blooming and just be awesome all the way through your fall, winter season. So really, really cool plants and really pretty easy to do. And there's just a humongous collection of different types of orchids out there. So I didn't bring in many other plants other than those. I think that's kind of wraps up my major groups of plants that are super, super popular right now. Like I said, philodendrons, fiddle leaf figs, and hopefully some of the advice and tips that I gave you today will help you grow those. I do have some other plants around. I talked about my easy plants to grow. Snake plants are awesome. So I'll bring some of these and just show you because they're super popular right now too. So I don't want to leave these out. Snake plants are awesome, really vertical, lots of different varieties of these now. Really easy to grow, medium to low light, can take a lot of different situations. They don't require a lot of watering. Wet, dry cycle for sure, so a very, very easy one. So if you're a beginner out there and you felt like maybe I scared you away from houseplants, I want to tell you that there's a lot of great indoor plants like snake plants that any beginner can grow, and even people that have grown indoor plants for years and years love these guys because it's just one that is very reliable and just adds a lot of texture and color and that verticality and that modern look, which I love. I also love rubber plants. Rubber plants are awesome. They call them rubber plants because they're very durable like rubber, but it's also because a lot of people think they're fake. But I just love that dark color. It's just something different that you don't see a lot on an indoor plant. Really, really cool plant. So a rubber plant is an awesome one. Part of the ficus family again. Medium to low light, wet, dry cycle, super, super easy one. We talked about the pothos, so that's another good one. I didn't mention dracaenas, but dracaenas are super easy plants to grow as well. Wet, dry cycle, medium light, very, very easy plant to grow. Dracaenas are awesome, lots and lots of different varieties. There's thin leaf ones that can get kind of cool. There's a really dark green one that I love as well. but this is called Limelight Dracaena, which I just love that chartreuse color. So there's just so many plants. I mean, I can talk about houseplants for probably days and days and days and still not cover them all. They're very popular. I'm going to answer your questions now, so if you want to stick around, I will answer all the questions now if I can. If I can't, because houseplants are just ever changing. I shouldn't say ever changing, but we're just constantly getting in new ones. And so it's kind of hard for me to keep up with all of it. And there's so much information out there. And Sarah is our buyer, and she's amazing, and she's got a ton of knowledge about this. And so do our houseplant associates here at Independence as well as Great Neck. They just have so much knowledge about all of these plants, and I'm constantly kind of picking their brains saying, tell me about this, tell me about this. So when she wrote down all those notes for me, that was a big help because I can only fit so much in this little brain of mine. So I've got a little bit of knowledge about a lot of different topics, and this is a very in-depth topic, indoor plants. And so having that knowledge here at the garden center is awesome. That's why we love our local garden centers, and I love the employees here because they're just such a wealth of knowledge. So come in, pick our brains, bring pictures, bring in your plants if it's struggling and you want some advice, bring in the plant, bring in some pictures. It speaks 1,000 words. It really, really helps us identify if there's a problem or an issue. If you have any kind of basic questions I missed the one on Wednesday. Wednesday was a really good one. I talked a lot about repotting, watering, fertilizing, and all that stuff. That's why I didn't spend too much time on that today. I really wanted to get into some of these specific categories of very, very popular indoor plants right now. So I'm going to go through and answer your questions. I hope everybody has a great day. If you're taking off, then have an amazing day. Have a great weekend. It's Friday. Enjoy the weekend. Hopefully you can come in and see us. Have a great day. But I'm going to go through and answer all the questions now if I missed some, because I know I saw some that popped in my head and said, oh, I should answer that now. But some of them I did not get to. So let's see. Where were we? So Kimberly said, I want plants that require no light. So no light is difficult. Now, I did never mention this, but if you have literally not much light at all, and you do want to grow some, we've got the full spectrum day spot bulbs for just a normal fixture. You can get this one right here, which is a propagation type of light bulb. So these are full spectrum. They're going to offer the plant everything that they need. So if you are having an issue with, say, like a philodendron, and I need a little bit brighter light, but I got to have it in this room, it's got to be in this room, I need it in this room, try a grow light. You can put these in just a lamp, and you're going to be fine, and it's actually going to kind of help you. It's going to give you full spectrum light inside your house, which is great. So you can put these right in normal light fixtures, or you can get a little grow light, a clamp light. In fact, I got one right here. I can show you. So these are awesome because you can give it this little light, this overhead light, and you can clamp it onto something, and you can put your bulb right in there, and you're ready to roll, and you got a really nice grow light. So if you are in a no light situation, Kimberly, then you might try a grow light in one of your lamps. And then you can just turn it on during the day, then turn it off at night and let it go through its cycle. Just make sure to turn it off so it's not getting all day light all the time. For low light situations, if you're in a very low light, try the snake plant. Very, very easy one to grow. Pothos is another pretty easy one to grow. ZZ plant, I think I put the ZZ plant back, but ZZ plants are another easy one to grow in a low light situation. So there's a lot of options. Come in and kind of look at your room throughout the day and see how much light. Do you need a flashlight to see in the middle of the day is what the question I always ask. If you don't, it's getting some light, some natural light, and that means we can grow a couple different plants if you want to try. So definitely come in and check us out. So Linda said, why not tap water? So tap water has things that we put into it to make it drinking water for us. Fluoride and different types of chemicals that we put into our water that are safe for us to ingest. And a lot of us use filters or drink only bottled water because of that. But tap water is designed to make us is to make it safe for us to drink. But if you let it sit out, a lot of those chemicals will evaporate out of the water. And tap water is not designed for plants, it's designed for humans. And so what I typically tell people is if you let it sit for 24 to 48 hours, then the fluoride and the other types of chemicals that we put in our water should evaporate out and really help with watering your plants. Rainwater, of course, is the most amazing thing. So if you've got the ability to get a rain barrel, put a rain barrel in. or just take your watering cans and keep them outside. And when you get rain, then you've collected some water. So you got a couple different options there. But rainwater is, of course, amazing. And that's why I tend to love when I see a storm coming and the weather is at the right temperature. So, of course, you wouldn't want to do this in the winter. But in the fall or spring or summer, when the temperature is okay at night, I will put the houseplant outside if I know I'm going to get a good rain, let it water it, and then I can bring it back in. The only issue that typically most people experience when they take their plants outside, whether it's for a summer vacation or even just for a watering overnight, is the possibility of bringing bugs back into the house. And so I think that's what most people get a little bit worried about. I talked about this in my webinar Wednesday, but I love this indoor-outdoor spray. I use it. I take my plants sometimes out for a summer vacation, and this one's just great. It's an aerosol. It's a traditional method. It's not organic, but it's a really good one because it forms that mist, that aerosol spray that gets into the nooks and crannies of the plant. And so if there's an insect hiding in there, this will knock it out. You can also use neem oil, spinosad soap, which are great options as well to kind of kill some of those insects before you bring it back inside. Well, Alicia, answer my question. Tap water has fluoride. It's the reason things like peace lilies have brown tips if you use it. Exactly. Very good point. And like the ponytail palm. If you ever want to grow a great palm, it's an amazing palm. That is why we don't want to use tap water on it. Kristen said, I love the advice on being outdoor potted plants indoors for winter. The giant Boston ferns I bought from you in late spring, for example. So Kristen, yes, the Boston ferns, you can definitely bring those inside. I tend to let those go, and I'll just tell you why. If you want to bring them in, of course, do it. But they do tend to drop a lot of stuff, which is why I use them outside on my front porch. I love them, but they do tend to be a little sheddy, and they tend to drop some stuff. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to bring them inside and try and grow them inside, you certainly can. It's pretty easy to do. They're not going to require as much water as they did outside. Inside, you're going to water maybe once a week, just depending. It's a fern, so they like to stay evenly moist. They're not going to grow as much this winter, but definitely you can grow them inside. You're just going to cut back on some of that watering. You should cut it back a little bit. And she said, also, I know snake varieties love a tight, crowded pot, but when do you know when to upsize? So the best advice that I have on plants all indoor plants, and I mentioned this on Wednesday, is that all indoor plants really like to be somewhat root bound. And the reason being is you don't want a lot of soil around the root ball, because if there's a lot of soil around the root ball, then that can stay too moist for too long of a period. And it can't use all that moisture. So keeping it root bound is perfectly fine. If you feel like there's not enough soil in there, or you're watering it more frequently because the plant might be wilting or the plant might be suffering a little bit, and then you take it out of the pot and you see it's just a massive ball of roots and there's not a whole lot of soil left in the pot anymore, that would be a great time to know to transplant it. If you do it in the spring so that it can have the spring and summer and into the fall to really acclimate and to really get some root system built up in that pot before it hits the winter time frame, that is definitely better because you got a longer period. If you're going into winter, so if you're right now fall into winter and it's a little root bound, I think you're okay. Let it be through the winter. It's perfectly fine. It's not going to need as much water because it's not actively growing as much. But if you transplanted it now, then you've got a lot more soil around it. And while even though you might not grade up much, and I typically recommend that, is don't go from a 6-inch to a 12-inch pot, go from a 6-inch to an 8-inch. Even just that little bit of extra soil around it can hurt it through those winter months when it might not be growing as aggressively. So do think about that. And also because you don't have the ability to take it outside to recoup if something happens. If it's a little stressed out and it's 20 degrees outside, you can't take it outside to kind of bring it back to life. You got to keep on waiting a couple months. And so if you do it in the spring, you're a little bit safer because you have the ability, the option to be able to take it outside. So Wendy said, could you talk about using artificial light for houseplants? What kind, how close to the plants to put them, how long to leave on, etc. I love a lot of bright light plants, but don't have good light for them. So I did kind of mention that, Wendy, and I hope you're still watching. But these work great. I do have other types of grow lights, whoop, as I drop it. But these work great. And like I said, you can use these just in regular light fixtures. You can get the full spectrum fluorescent tubes if you want to buy a shop light. I've got some nice tube lights that work great. If you want to put them, I like to put those underneath like a countertop or something. So like in a kitchen, you could mount it underneath your cabinets and then you could grow a little plant selection there. Or you could do it in the garage. A lot of people do that. You know, get a shop light outside in the garage because our garages don't typically get too cold. And you can put your plants out there to get a little bit of additional light just to maybe like refurbish them or get them going. But inside the home, See if I can get that light back. Inside your home, put some of these light bulbs into your fixtures. And then not only one will it benefit your body and your health, but also your plant's health will love it. When do you want to run the lights is a great question. How close? This is full spectrum, so you should be okay. If you're growing plants to really like grow plants to, as a grower, you would probably raise the lights and that would help kind of form a fuller plant for sale. But for inside your home, I wouldn't worry about that too much. I do love this one for that specific reason. Is if I've got a plant that maybe like a succulent that I love and I really want to grow, but I don't have enough light, and I'm growing this with a clamp light, I might put it a little bit closer, especially if after I've pruned it and I want that plant to come back out and be nice and bushy and full, then I can put this a little bit lower and it's a clamp and allows me to raise it over time and lower it over time if I need to. So I love having this as an option around. It's just basically, let's see if I can open it and show you. I think you all probably are like, I know what a clamp light is. But, you got to build it. So basically what it is a clamp that you can clamp onto a shelf, on a pole, onto a lot of different things, and it makes it very easy to adjust it. So that's a really good option. Let's see if you can see that clamp there on that in there. So really, really cool way of doing it. And so hopefully that helps Wendy with your situation of wanting to grow these bright light plants in a low light situation, is just get some grow lights. So Valerie said, how do you take cuttings from aloe vera plants? That is a great question. I've never been a propagation expert, so I'm going to learn with you. I'm going to ask Sarah to help me with that one, and I'll get that advice, and I will answer your question when I get done, Valerie. I don't know, because I would think that you could just take this guy off and stick it in some water, but you might have to cut it, let it dry. You might lay it down on the soil. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. You probably can do a little bit of research on the internet, but I will find out from our expert and get back to you, because that is a great question and I don't know. So I get to learn with you. I love learning something new every day. That's why I love this job, is I'll never know it all. So great question, and thanks for stumping me, and I will find out and let you know. So Deborah said, I'm not successful with aloe. They seem to rot. So yep, let them dry out. Like I said, that tip point is very, very helpful. Let those tips go a little bit shallow, where they're almost losing some moisture out of the tips, almost to the point where they're getting yellow, and then that's when you want to water. So let your plant tell you when you need to water. And that is a very common thing that happens with aloe, is they tend to rot. So Carol said palms. So palms, I mentioned the ponytail palm because I love that one, and we've got a great selection right now. There's lots of other palms, great floor plants. There's amazing selection of different types of palms that you can grow indoors. So Carol, we've got some of those now. Bamboo palm is one of my favorites. Very, very easy one to grow. Palms just like to stay evenly moist. And so for people that like to water a little bit more, that's important. Just don't let them sit in too much water. And so that's what I tend to find with plants that we say keep evenly moist, is we tend to let them sit in water too long. So you want evenly moist situation, medium light, very easy plants to grow, lots and lots of different types of palms. And we've got a good selection right now. The ponytail palm is just one of my favorites. It's a very, very easy one to grow. So Deborah said, who do I see when I come in for a philodendron? You just come in and talk to any of our houseplant experts. All of our houseplants have amazing knowledge about these plants. Sarah is our buyer, and sometimes she's in there, but sometimes she's not. She sometimes has to work on the computer and work in the back and do different things. So she is a great expert. She knows a ton, but she has taught all of our houseplant associates everything they know. They know so much. So who do you see, Deborah? If you come here to the independent store, just head on back to the greenhouse, ask for assistance. We'll get you the right person. If we don't know the answer, we're going to tell you we don't know the answer, but we'll always find out the answer. And that's what's so great about having all of the knowledge that we have here, is if we don't know, we'll tell you and we'll find out for you. What type of soil do you need for succulents? Great question. I didn't mention a lot about soil. We do have specific types of soil for succulents. We've got a cactus and succulent mix, and typically that's going to have a little bit more pumice in there, so it's going to be a little bit heavier of a soil, but it's actually going to be more well drained. It's heavier because you got a heavier organic matter or substance in there, like pumice or sand, but those are larger granulars than a finer soil, and so it's going to allow moisture to go through them much faster. So it's going to be a very well aerated soil, basically. Now you can grow succulents in regular potting soil. It's not that you can't. You just got to let them dry out a little bit. and just make sure you're not overwatering too much. But a succulent mix is a kind of surefire way to get a really, really good mix. We carry one from Black Gold, but we also carry one from Espoma that are specifically designed for succulents and cactus. Martha said, I love orchids, but I kill them. So Martha, usually when people tell me that, I tell them that they're babying them too much. They're pampering them too much. Make sure you find the right light. So if it's a moth orchid, that early morning sunlight or that early sunlight, getting them a little bit of shade in the afternoon. If it's a lot of the other types of orchids, they can take a little bit more sun, so maybe it's not enough light. Watch the greenness of the leaf. If the leaf isn't quite as green as you think it should be, then it's too much light. If it's too dark of a green, you need to get a little bit more light. So it kind of seems the opposite, right? You would think a lighter color leaf would mean that it needs more sun, but it's actually the opposite with orchids. Other than that, you should be pretty well off. I like to do a soaking with my orchids. I like to really soak that bark and then let them sit for about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 1 to 2 weeks, depending on your growing conditions. But orchids typically thrive on neglect, and I think that's kind of a general rule of thumb for most of our indoor plants. Is we tend to baby them and pamper them too much, and so just give them a little bit of neglect, which means just don't think about watering them so much. I think that's all we think that we can do is water them, and typically we're over watering our indoor plants. So try that with your orchids. Hopefully that helps you out, Martha. So Deborah said, can you do a root cutting on the fig? Another good question. Root cuttings, I don't see where that would be a problem. Now, if you're talking about, again, propagation, I don't know. If you're talking about root cuttings to contain the size of the plant, then yes. And it would just be, when would you do that? So that would be another good stumper. Root cuttings, a lot of people do them on bonsais, obviously, to keep them in those small pots for a long time. If it's an older plant and you're trying to keep it in your house and you're trying to keep the size contained as far as the pot that it has to go into, then root cuttings are done. I will just have to find out, Deborah, specifically on which one you're talking about. If you're, I'm assuming you're probably talking about root cuttings to keep the size contained. I will find out when the best time to do that is, whether that's in the spring or fall. I would guess spring. You typically would say fall for an outdoor plant, but probably spring on the indoor plant to allow that root system to regenerate throughout the growing season, so that you don't cut off its roots that are feeding it and that are absorbing the moisture through the winter season when it's not growing as aggressively. So Valerie said, is it possible to put the correct spelling of the plants that we talked about on the website? Yes. So when you check in a couple days, probably like Monday or Tuesday, hopefully, we'll have the notes up on our website. So when you go to our website, scroll down to the webinar link, click on that, click on this video or see below it, and you'll have the notes, and we'll have all the correct spelling there. Because I know houseplants are tricky with the names for sure. So Martha said, what about misting or watering succulents? Misting I would not do with succulents. They're an arid kind of desert type of plant. I typically just water the soil on those. And just like I mentioned, Martha, and probably hadn't gotten to that part yet when you asked that question, let them get really dry in between waterings. Let those plants start to kind of really, you can feel the moisture in the leaves. Let them get to that point. Let the soil almost wick away or pull away from the side of the pot. And that's when you want to water them. So wet, really dry cycle. Let them really get dry before you water them again. So Deborah said, I don't like to take them outside because of the insects, even though I catch myself doing an insecticidal soap. Any suggestions? How long should I use the insecticidal soap before bringing it in? I love the way it grows outside. So Deborah, yeah, I mean, I love my indoor plants. I love them when they're outside because they do so well. But the insecticidal soap, you can really use inside or outside. And how long you need to wait before bringing it in. Probably insecticidal soap, you'd love to get 2 or 3 sprays in because it's a little bit of a lighter formula. If you can get that spinosad soap, then if you can come in and get some of that. Did I keep that in here? I don't know if I did. Yep. So this is made by Natural Guard. It's spinosad soap. And the reason I like this is it's an insecticidal soap and it's got spinosad. And spinosad is a great organic insecticide. So this would be a great option. You probably get away with 2 sprays before you have to bring it in. So just watch your nighttime temperatures and make sure you get 2 sprays on it before you bring it in. And then just check it throughout the winter and just make sure there's no insects living in there. All right, so Mallory said, I'm having trouble with my peace lily blooms either staying green without turning white or browning. That might be a light condition, is what that probably sounds like. Maybe low fertility. It's trying to bloom, but it can't put all the energy into it. So another good question. I'll have to check and see if maybe Sarah knows a perfect answer for that. My guess would be most likely it could be the tap water. So Mallory, if you're using tap water, let the tap water sit for 24 to 48 hours before using it. Could be a low fertility, or it could be the light. So check on those three things and make sure that you're good there. Peace lilies are good in medium to low light. If it's in a highlight situation, maybe that's causing it. And then water it on a wet, dry cycle. The nice thing about peace lilies, it'll tell you when it needs to be watered. It'll start to kind of hang a little bit. That's when you want to give it a good soaking. And an evenly moist situation is not bad for a peace lily as well. But my guess is it's probably the tap water thing. You probably, if you just let that tap water sit out a little while, I think you'll be good. What about using water in a house water softener units? Use salt. If you've got salt in your water, salt is a form of fertilizer is a form of salt, I should say. And so salt buildup can cause problems. So if you got salt in your water, then you might see a salt buildup over time in your soil, and you'll see a kind of a white markings in your soil, or you'll see your pots will start to get a white brim around them like a salt residue. And that's not a horrible bad thing. Epsom salts, a lot of people use those for fertilizer for a plant, but just don't let it build up over time. And so what you would want to do is every so often you'd want to go wash some of that old soil off, wash the pot out with soap and water, and then replant it with a nice new fresh potting soil to kind of help that salt build up over time. Valerie said, I love African violets, but I've killed every one. How should I be taking care of them? I really want to get some more. So Valerie, African violets like medium to high light, so a little bit more light. They don't like any kind of water on their leaves, and they like to grow in a self-watering pot. As typically, Valerie, the most common thing is a lot of people might just grow them in a regular pot, but a self-watering pot is going to be great. It's going to help wick up the water, keep that soil evenly moist, and then giving it a liquid feed. We've got great African violet fertilizers specifically designed for African violets. Giving it a liquid feed every so often definitely helps keep those thriving. But you're going to want a good amount of light on those, which is typically probably the most common problem is medium to highlight, and really highlights the best, self-watering pot, and giving it a liquid feed every so often to keep them rolling. Hopefully that helps with your question, Valerie. What's the best way to bring in outdoor plants during the cold weather without bringing in the gnats and other insects? So there's one really, really strong solution that you can use. It's called malathion, and you can do that as a soil drench. But again, what I like to do is use this aerosol. I'll usually spray it about 14 days before I bring it in. I'll spray the top of the plant. I'll spray the soil. I'll spray around the pot, and then I'll wait and do it again probably the day before I bring it in. Just so I can get kind of 2 good sprays on it. You can spray this about every 10 to 14 days, but this is a traditional method. But that really, really does help. A lot of people have issues with gnats. They lay their eggs in the soil when you bring them inside. They think it's spring, and so they hatch, and they tend to hover around the plant. We do carry these little sticky traps. I'm out of them now, but it's a stick that you put in the soil. It's got a little yellow piece of paper that's sticky. You can put that in the soil, and the gnats tend to get attracted to that and stick to them, and then you can throw it away when you've collected them all. That's a good way. A lot of people put sand on top of the soil, which can help, which won't allow the adults to come and lay eggs in that because they can't get through the sand. The other thing is it could be a poor potting soil. So if you didn't get the potting soil from us, hopefully you did. But if you did, hopefully it's not that. But potting soils can sometimes, if it's not a high quality potting soil, sometimes they have the egg and larva stage already in there. Also, if you've got plants that you've graded up into too big of a pot and you got too wet of potting soil sitting around it, that can also cause gnat problems. But bringing it in from outside, usually you just need to spray it with some sort of insecticide, whether it's organic or traditional. Spray it down really good before you bring it in, just to hopefully kill some of the eggs and the larvae and the adults that you might be bringing in. All right, so let's see what else we got. Deborah said, Laura said, what's wrong when snake plants are wilting and not upright? So if it's wilting and not upright, might be too little water. Could be too much water too. So that sounds like a watering issue. You might try just adjusting your light situation. I mean, that's typically the thing that I tell people with any kind of indoor plant issue is try something new. If it's not doing well, if it's not performing well in the current situation, then we need to change something up. And so what I would typically recommend with a snake plant that maybe is wilting is check your watering. Make sure you're doing a wet-dry cycle. They can take pretty much anything. It could just be that it's an older leaf and it just needs to be cut out. And a lot of times plants will do that is they'll put a lot of energy into a leaf that is struggling, and so the overall plant can struggle because it's putting a lot of energy trying to save that leaf, when instead you should just cut it out and let it put the rest of its energy back into other leaves. So hopefully that helps with your Deborah said snake plant issue as well. I've been growing the snake plant for years, but it dies in the house I'm in now. I'm confused. That is confusing since obviously you had it for years and you didn't have a problem. Changes, and I talked about this in my seminar on Wednesday, acclimation periods are very, very common. For sure, coming out of our greenhouse, going into your home, there's always going to be an acclimation period where it's going to go through a bit of an adjustment period where it's trying to figure out its new situation, its new growing environment, and how to grow in there. So could it be that? I don't know how quickly you've been in or how long you've been in your new home, but my guess again is not the right light condition, maybe too much light, too little light, one of those issues, or watering would be my only guess. I mean, maybe low fertility, maybe it needs to be repotted, those types of things. I wouldn't do it now, I'd wait till spring. But you can always take some pictures and bring them in and let us look at it. So Deborah, it sounds like something has changed and it's confused, and so are you. But hopefully that helps. And again, come in and see us. If you can bring the plant in, great. If not, then take some pictures, let us look at it, figure out your lighting situation. So, because that's going to be what we're going to ask you is how much light does it get, those types of questions. How often are you watering, those types of things. Gloria said, Christmas cactus, the branches keep falling off and leaves are small. What light level and moisture level? So Christmas cactus is kind of in that succulent family, so a wet-dry cycle is going to work perfectly for a Christmas cactus, and medium to high light. So you're going to want pretty good light on those. And so it sounds like if leaves are falling off and they're small, doesn't sound like it's got enough light, and so it's struggling a little bit. And again, if you're in a situation, or not again, I shouldn't say again, I talked about this on Wednesday, which is why I said again, but Super Thrive is an awesome vitamin supplement that helps kind of reboost a plant. If you think you've got it in the right situation and you know you're not overwatering or underwatering, which are kind of the things that we can control, is the amount of light and the amount of water, instead of giving it a plant food to try and spur it out of something, which it's struggling for a reason, and feeding it doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna fix the problem. You're forcing it to grow when it's trying to just recoup. This is a great solution. It's Super Thrive. It comes in a water soluble, so you can use it the next time you water. It also comes in this foliage spray, which is great. So you got a couple different options there of how to use Super Thrive. But this is basically, like I always call it, kind of steroids for plants. Kind of takes the shock off. You know, a steroid takes the shock off your body. We're given those when our bodies are going through different things. Super Thrive is kind of like that. It's a vitamin supplement. Kind of takes the funk or the shock off of a plant and helps it through a tough situation. So you might try that. If you think you're doing everything right and it's still struggling, maybe it just needs to get some of that shock off of it, and Super Thrive is a great option. How many hours of artificial light do plants need in the winter? Somewhere between 6 to 8 hours would be plenty of the artificial light. But what I like to do is, if I'm growing under a grow light, I'll turn it on in the morning when I get up, and I'll turn it off typically when the sun goes down outside. So it's getting about the same amount of light that would naturally be getting in the winter. It's a very easy way to do it. Now in the summer, if you're growing with artificial light, you might have it on for a longer period of time. You can also ask us if it's a specific plant need. Most of these plants, think about, one of my favorite sayings is, Mother Nature did not create these plants. So a lot of these plants are going to grow in the tropical rainforest and tropical climates, which means they're getting light for an extended period of the day and a normal period of the day that we experience here in the summer, but we don't experience in the winter. So in the winter, they're not going to actively grow like they do in the summer when our sun is out for a longer period of time. But they're used to that condition year round. But I like to let them go into their normal dormancy, because eventually I would love for them to grow in the home in the condition that they're growing in, and so that I don't have to keep changing anything, and I can grow them in a specific condition in an area of my home for a longer period of time. So hopefully that helps. Let's see. I put my holiday cactus outside on a tree and bring it in before frost. So Deborah, if that works, that's great. Maybe that helped the other customer or the other person that was asking about the Christmas cactus. Taking them outside might help rejuvenate it. I forgot to mention that. That's always great advice. Maybe I'm transplanting the snake plant in too large of a plant. So if you got, that's a great point, Deborah. I think you were one that was having an issue with your snake plant. So if you put it from too small of a plant, or you had it in a small planter and you put it in a bigger planter, that certainly can cause a problem. I always tell people too much excessive soil means just like you standing in a bathtub. That soil cannot dry out quick enough. And so you're going to be kind of keeping it in a moist situation for too long. There's no root system in there. We don't have evaporation. We don't have wind. We don't have the same sunlight that you would be getting outside. And so there's no way to get that moisture out of the soil other than the plant using it. So if that's the situation, then you might take it outside if we get some warm days again, just to allow it to dry out a little bit better. Even on a 65, 70 degree day, it will dry out faster outside. And then you could replant it again. If you're gonna have to grow it in that planter that you've got it in already, then just water it a little bit lighter and just water it kind of in the center of the plant, and try not to water too much of that excessive soil on the outside. And then hopefully in the spring, then we can get it to kind of really get that root system kind of larger and fill up some of that excess soil. Oh, we got a great answer. So Sarah got on and she's answering. It's extremely hard to use an aloe clipping to produce a plant. Growers use tissue culture because of the difficulties. Great to know. There we go. Just joining, so sorry if that was already discussed, but do you have any tips for African milk tree? I just got some cuttings from a friend and I'm hoping they survive. The cutting for propagation on the fig. So Deborah is asking about, you can take cuttings from, so we answered, you can take, and I'm learning here, and this is what I love about this, you can take cuttings of your fiddle leaf fig in spring when you have green soft wood and use a rooting hormone to produce a new plant. Place it outside in the shade all summer to produce a nice root ball for fall. And then she said a green bloom on a peace lily is actually past green. They emerge white and then turn green. At this point, the plant is using all of its energy to produce the seed in the stamen, keeping it from producing new blooms. Cut the old stalks off as far as you can. Go and start using a fertilizer in good light. You will have new blooms before you know it. So great. So the green bloom is just an older bloom that's been sitting there for a long time. Hopefully they're not coming out green. All right, so can soapy water get rid of bugs? So yes, home remedies do work if you do the right ratio. I tend to get one from us, a natural or an organic from Natural Guard is a great one, because this we know is designed for plants. So that's the only question that I have is what kind of soap is it? I don't know, all those types of things. So better safe than sorry with my plants. So I always buy one that I know is designed for plants rather than using my own soap and water that I'm not sure quite how well it will do. And I don't know the dilution rate. So these home remedies, I always saw a lot of people ask me these home remedy questions. And while some of them might work, and if they work great for you, great. But I usually say better safe than sorry, and use something that is specifically designed. All of our insecticides and fungicides are designed for plants, and so you know you're safe. All right, trying to propagate a raindrop peperomia, keep rotting of water and dirt, please help. So Joy, I'm gonna let Sarah answer that because I don't know if she's still watching, but we will get back to your question specifically on that. These are great questions, maybe a little bit out of my league or a little bit out of my wealth of knowledge that I have right now. So we will answer all of your questions as we have time, as soon as we get done. So I hope everybody has a great day. I hope you enjoyed this seminar. We'll be talking about pansies next week, which will be great. And then we'll continue to do these all the way through the Christmas season and offer lots of decorating tips and different advice there as well. I know you've got lots and lots of questions about indoor plants. That's great. We love that. Come in and ask us. Ask us online. We'll get you the right answer. And we're always going to be honest and say if we don't know. And so that's kind of the world I'm in. And sometimes I don't know the answer. So I will get you those answers and we'll get to work on those for you. So if I missed anything, it's because I'm running out of time. And so I've got to run. but we will get you those answers as soon as we possibly can. I hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for joining. Enjoy your weekend. Have a great one, and hopefully we'll see you in the store soon. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody.